Welcome to my ranking of the Resident Evil movies. Over the past few months, I have been reviewing all of these. You'll find those videos in my Resident Evil playlist, but now that I've covered all of them, it's time to do the obligatory ranking to finish things off. So we've got 11 films today, actually 10 films and 1 TV show. I did wonder whether to include Infinite Darkness, but you know what? It's roughly the same length as a movie. When you add up the runtimes of the 4 episodes, it comes to about 90 minutes. So I think it's fair to include it, and I will be doing. And I guess the last thing to say before we dive in is that these are just my opinions. Don't beat me up for them. I'd love to hear your rankings in the comments below, but now we've got that out of the way, let's jump in and we'll start with the film that I consider to be the worst in this franchise by some distance. This film is terrible. It's probably the only film in the Paul Anderson run I'd be tempted to skip over the next time I go through these. It's like a greatest hits of all the films up to this point, but played out of tune. It's really awful. There's no original monsters in it. Some characters from the previous film don't come back for this, which is just confusing. And yet we bring back characters who are dead from the really early movies, even bad characters like Rain. There's no emotional impact in bringing these characters back, so why bother? And there are some confusing sequences. One, at the very start, plays backwards, but it just messes up the whole thing. It's hard to follow. There's another bit about halfway through that's like a rip-off of a scene from Dawn of the Dead, but it's with a cloned Alice, and it just makes the whole scene just really pointless. I could go on. This film is just really bad. I'd give it half a point for a reasonable portrayal of the Ada Wong character, but that is about it. So with this one, we're going from bad to mediocre at least, but it's still not much to write home about. This film does look gorgeous. If you watch it in HD or 4K, the desert scenes look incredible, but the movie's got no soul at all. We hang out with these bunch of characters, including Alice, as they rumble across the desert in some kind of convoy, but they have no goal, there's no purpose. They're literally just driving, that's it. About halfway through, they suddenly decide to themselves, oh, should we go to Alaska? Yeah, that'll give us something to do. That'll give us a purpose in this movie, but it's a bit late in the day at that point. The characters themselves, most of them are new, but we don't really get to know them. They all seem to get like 1 or 2 lines of dialogue, and that's it. So when they die, we just don't really feel anything. And even the characters who return from the previous film are not treated that great, especially LJ. I mean, he was one of the best things about Resident Evil Apocalypse. In Extinction, they've just turned him into a complete arsehole. Where's Jill Valentine as well? She seems to have just vanished into thin air. My favourite scenes in this are when we're at the villain's lair, that there are some great times to be had with those sequences, and the final fight between Alice and the main villain is absolutely awesome. It's not often that I say that the final fight in a film or a game is the thing that I like the most about it, but that is the case here. But on the whole, Resident Evil Extinction, for me, one of the most overrated Resi films out there. So at this point, let me say that we're now into the good ones. It's only really Retribution and Extinction which will get some scorn from me, but from this point on, it's all good. Starting with this, the second animated film, but you don't have to watch them sequentially. This one takes place in Russia, so Leon goes over there to investigate the link between the president of a small country and BOWs. It turns out this woman has got access to tyrants, and there are liquors floating around. There's Las Plagas in the area. There's a lot on Leon's plate in this film. What I don't like about it is the fact that a lot of the characters we meet in this are pretty weak. You know, apart from Leon, there's not much going on there, but just as a balls-to-the-wall action film, it's a lot of fun, and I highly recommend you try the animated films if you haven't already. So this was the first animated film. It's probably one of the most straightforward Resi films ever in terms of its plot. Half of it takes place at a zombie-ridden airport, and then we move to some kind of really futuristic medical facility for the remainder, and that's where we get the big boss fight at the end. But the reason why I've got this one just ahead of Damnation is because of the characters. I mean, probably the action in Damnation might be slightly better than it is in this film, but this one's got the better characterization. We've not just got Leon in this one, we've got Claire as well. We've also got Angela Miller, somebody who I'm not familiar with outside of this movie, but I believe she may have been in one or two of the games that I've not played. I don't know. But just having that three-pronged attack in terms of the protagonists gives this one a little bit of something extra, and you see that at the end when they're all saying goodbye to each other. You feel something, you know, it's not just Leon walking into the sunset by himself. So this is where I've got the TV show, though, as I alluded to earlier, you can just watch this as a movie, which is pretty much what I did. It's got probably the most complicated plot out of all the animated ones. I found that I couldn't just watch this enjoying the action. I had to keep my brain in gear about how certain reveals changed the context of earlier scenes and situations that I'd seen. So I really enjoyed this one in terms of its story, though it's still got some great action in there as well. There's a great sequence on a submarine. The final fight, although nothing we haven't seen before, is still a lot of fun. And let me also say that this is a Leon and Claire show this time around. I saw this when it came out of the cinema. I haven't yet had a chance to give it a second viewing on home release. I am planning to buy a Blu-ray or a 4K at some point. I've just not got around to it. And in terms of today's ranking, I think this film could have really benefited from a second watch. My biggest worry going into this one was the fact that they were going to be trying to adapt two different games and squeeze them into the same storyline. And you know what? That turned out to be the biggest fault with the movie. It was quite jarring, bouncing between the Spencer Mansion and the police station. I get what they were trying to do. I think they were trying to rush through the games at a certain pace, and maybe they could cover a lot of the game series in the space of maybe 3 or 4 films, but it just didn't really work. The box office for this film was pretty terrible compared to the Resident Evil film before it, so you know what, I think they might as well have just concentrated on Resident Evil 1, the video game, and just tried to make as good a film as possible with that, and not even worry about box office or the film to follow. This is easily the best of the animated films for me. If you're only going to watch one of these, make it this one. It was the third one made, but that doesn't matter because they're mostly standalone. So this one, in terms of characters, has got Rebecca Chambers, Leon, and Chris Redfield. All three of them in this are absolutely phenomenal. We've got a great villain as well. There's a really great balance in Resident Evil Vendetta between horror and action. So the first sequence in the film takes place at this spooky mansion. It's really creepy. It's got great atmosphere. Then later on we get the balls to the wall stuff. Leon on a motorbike being chased by demonic dogs. We've got Chris Redfield shooting about 100 zombies in the same corridor sequence. And then this tremendous final battle on top of a skyscraper. When I try and imagine what this film might have looked like as a live action piece, wow. But you know what? It's great as it is. This one gets a lot of crap, I've noticed, but I think it's really fun. It's so energetic. Okay, at the start we are sort of cheated when we don't get the big battle at the White House that we were promised at the end of the 5th film, but once you get over that disappointment, the rest of the movie is just so enjoyable. It's sort of like a Mad Max film for about 25 minutes, but with zombies. It's awesome. And then Alice meets up with her new set of buddies that she's going to have for the rest of the film, and they go on this little incursion into this underground facility, and all these characters start to get picked off in really gruesome ways. It's just really, really fun, and it all builds up to a conclusion which just about works, I think. We get the best villains in the series coming back, so Wesker's here. The other guy who's been in a few of them, whose name I forget, tragically, there are 2 of him in this, which is a lot of fun. There's like a priest version and a scientist version. Oh, what's his name? It's not going to come to me, but I don't know. When it comes to Resident Evil Final Chapter, I don't get the criticism that gets thrown its way. I think it's a really, really top-class way to end the Alice sequence of films. So you know what? If you don't like it, nanas to you. So at number 3, I've got the original. This is one of the best in terms of storyline. Not only is it drawing on the really great source material of the first video game, but it also introduces this amnesia plotline, which works really well because Alice and her new cop friend are constantly trying to remember things about their past lives throughout this story. And every time they remember something, a new piece of the puzzle seems to fall into place. It's very cleverly done. I like the design of the facility. This film did take some time for me to get used to. I remember the first time I watched it, I wasn't even sure I liked it because it was just so different to how I pictured a Resident Evil film would be, but I kept going back to it every sort of couple of years, and over time I developed a love for it. I'm going to stop short of saying it's a great film. It's probably not, but it's so much fun from beginning to end. The laser sequence is obviously very famous now, and the opening is great. The woman in the elevator, oh God, my neck just feels funny after watching that. The liquor fight on the train, there's so much to talk about with this, so much to unpick. I think over time this has somehow aged very well and become a very good horror film despite its quite weird style. This one does what Welcome to Raccoon City tried to do. It merges two games into one film. So in this instance, it uses Resi 2 and Resi 3, but that tactic works a lot better here than it did in Welcome to Raccoon City, because Resi 2 and Resi 3 both take place at roughly the same time. They both take place in Raccoon City, just in different parts of the city. It makes sense to merge those two games if you're going to make a film. It makes much less sense to merge Resi 1 and 2, which are very different. They take place in totally different places. The big ace in the hole for Resi Apocolypse is the Nemesis. It's just brilliantly designed in this film, and it's not all over the movie like a bad smell. It's only in it a certain amount of time, which keeps it creepy, keeps it intimidating. I like the characters in this one. The mercenaries are good guys that you want to root for. I like the school teacher woman, Jill Valentine's a fun character. Alice absolutely kicks ass in this one. The action from start to finish is just one big rip-roaring fun ride of greatness. I love Resident Evil Apocalypse. I think it was a great sequel and it's really, really enjoyable, but it's not my favourite Resi movie overall. Let's now find out what that is. Resident Evil Afterlife, it's the stuff, baby. This film has something which none of the other films have, a great soundtrack. I've not mentioned music once in this rankings up until now, but when I think of Resident Evil Afterlife, one of the first things I think about is that incredible soundtrack by Tom Handy. It's just so pulse-poundingly brilliant. Paul Anderson was just creatively on fire when it came to this film, right from the very beginning, when you see that Japanese woman standing in the rain and she's turning in slow motion and you know there's going to be an outbreak at any moment. And then shortly after, Alice takes 50 clones into Wesker's secret lab, and it's just the most bonkers thing you've ever seen, but somehow they pull it off. It's great to watch. Wesker in this film is amazing. I love Sean Roberts' portrayal of this character. He's in some of the other films, but he's in this film the most, and it's just great. He chews the scenery. Literally, you see his jaw, brilliant. And the story of this film progresses naturally from A to B. I get why Alice is going here. I get why she's going there. She goes to an LA prison, which is surrounded by zombies, and it's a great idea to set some zombie action in that kind of place. The scene where she goes off the side of the building into the zombies is just brilliant. The Axeman as well, love that monster in this. There's no explanation for this thing. We don't need one. Retribution tried to bring it back, which was a mistake. It was effective first time around. Didn't need that thing to come back again. The final fight on the boat with Wesker, when he's spinning around like Agent Smith from The Matrix, just brilliant. I love it. It puts a smile on my face. For me, Resident Evil Afterlife is the pure definition of brilliance, and yeah, it is my favourite Resident Evil film. Do let me know yours in the comments. And that's it. We've come to the end of my Resident Evil review series and rankings. I've really enjoyed this project, and I guess that's it. I will see you all again for something different in the next video. Bye-bye for now.